Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with Sarah Lightshoe. We are going to be talking about creating strategic ease in your private practice. So thank you for making time on your Friday. This is a nice way to wrap up the week, I think.
Absolutely.
My name is Ashley Secord. I am the owner of Thrive Billing Services. I also have a private practice in Minnesota called Thrive Therapy. Sarah and I have actually known each other for probably over a decade now. We've done a lot of networking. We've spent a lot of time drinking coffee together and just have maintained our friendship over the years. And anytime we get the opportunity to collaborate and work together has been like very enjoyable. So welcome, Sarah. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Lightshoe. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in Minnesota also, and I have a private practice, a solo private practice in the Eagan area. And in addition to my therapy practice, I own the Vibrant Therapist Consulting, where I coach and work with other therapists who are finding their way, finding a way to do their work in a way that's really, truly doable for them. So I help therapists with things like boundaries, structure, creating systems, all with the ultimate intention of helping therapists create space to shine as vibrant therapists. And I've known Ashley for sure for 10 years here. It was 10 years ago this last fall that I opened my private practice.
Wow.
And yep. And Ashley, you were ahead of me on the journey with that. And so gracious with your knowledge though.
Yeah, definitely not by, I think maybe by a year or two.
Yeah.
Awesome. Just so you know, Sarah and I both have some events coming up. I'm sure her events are posted first. Why don't you tell us about your virtual work sessions?
Absolutely. So we'll definitely talk about co-working as one of the strategies that can help therapists find ease. But I do offer a space for people who want to come together and co-work. We meet on Zoom usually twice a month, and these are the upcoming dates for the remainder of 2023. And the idea is we just gather on Zoom. I create a structure and a format, but everyone comes with their own tasks to work on. And it's just a container for you to actually follow through on prioritizing that work that you might be putting off a lot. So people work on things like notes during this time. I'm always co-working too. So I'm usually working on writing projects because those are the things that I kind of push to the bottom of my to-do list. And everyone says that with the experience of working alongside of other people, they just feel much more motivated to follow through because they know I'm going to ask them how it went every time we take a break. But also it's just that momentum of knowing that other people are working alongside of you that really pushes you to kind of move forward. So these will continue into 2024 as well. But I've only scheduled the dates through the end of the year so far.
Awesome. Yeah, I do co-working twice a month. I definitely benefit from it.
Absolutely. Me too.
Tell us a little bit about your documentation day coming up.
Absolutely. Documentation day, there's one more left for 2023. So documentation day is kind of a combination of an educational workshop all about the strategies that I recommend for therapists who are working on catching up on documentation backlog specifically, but then also creating a system for staying current with their documentation going forward. So we start with the presentation, and then we have a huge chunk of time that is co-workings as well, so that when people leave documentation day, they can say, yes, I knocked out, a bunch of notes, or I knocked out a whole bunch of treatment plans. And it's not one of those things where you just show up and then you have like a whole bunch of things that you need to try to figure out how to implement later. We're actually working on implementing it while I'm right there with you, and you have the opportunity to ask me questions as we go. So that one will be coming up here on December 11th.
That's great. I don't know that many therapists that need to catch up on documentation though.
I think some people don't and some people do. So this is for those who do.
Just kidding. It's all of us.
Ashley, what do
Awesome.
you have coming up?
So this is our last, our meeting is our last 2023 event. So I'm restarting all of our coffee break series in 2024. So January 19th, we'll be doing our introduction to private practice billing, which is great for people who are just starting out in private practice or who have been in private practice and need a nice refresher overview of what a billing cycle looks like, what they can expect from like their EHR, or how to operate their EHR in a smoother way. It's just a really nice free refresher of like how billing it works and how to navigate insurance. So that's coming up January 19th. After that, we'll be doing our clean claim submission. And I will say that you can do these out of order, but they're sort of laid out in a sequential way that if you go to the intro to billing and then do the clean claim one, it might make a little bit more sense. But these are essentially practical strategies for making sure your claims don't get rejected, making sure that everything is submitted clean at the onset, information to obtain from your clients before you even ever submit a claim. It's just really a like best practices for your billing. The next one is navigating Optum supervisory protocol. Oops, it still says November 10th on there. Clearly did not update the date. But that is going to be in February. I think it is, I'm just going to check really quick. Look at me. It is on the 23rd, February 23rd. So Optum supervisory protocol is what allows practices to bill for pre-licensed staff, and they have a requirement of like 5 licensed providers, and then you also have to go through an audit. So we talk about the process of Optum supervisory protocol, their requirements. I actually provide slides of the actual audit as well, and then just go through that process and ways to navigate your anxiety around it, which I did all on my own. There was a lot of anxiety around having done that for my practice. So those are all of the events. I apologize, the date isn't updated on that one. This event is on February 23rd. All right. I think that's all the events. We have so many events coming up. Excellent. So we're going to jump right into our outline that we have for this, and here's some things that you can expect. We're going to discuss some practical time management techniques, as well as strategies for creating a well-structured client schedule, the significance of self-care to sustain a private practice, and then some recommendations and resources for protecting your time and energy. Please note that we want this to be a conversation between Sarah and I. We definitely encourage your questions and want to talk about the things that matter to you or are on your mind. So as we're discussing, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box, and we are very motivated to answer them. Speaking of which, we'll get you guys participating right away. So if you wouldn't mind participating in the chat, where is everybody from? I saw a few familiar Minnesota faces.
Okay,
Oh, welcome.
we have New Jersey.
Welcome.
Nice.
Awesome.
Okay,
Great.
a couple Minnesota, Florida.
All right.
Definitely warmer than here.
Right.
I think 3 Minnesotans so far.
I love
Florida
it.
and New Jersey.
Excellent. Welcome. Excellent. And so my next question is, what area of private practice would you like to experience more ease
Ooh,
when
that's
you
a good
think about it?
question.
So I know we're talking about time management and scheduling and self-care. We talked about documentation. Is there some area, another way to frame it would be, what area causes you the most stress?
Yeah, I was gonna say, where are you overwhelmed?
Yes, that's a great way to
Where
put
do you
it.
wish things were just flowed better, right, in your
Yes,
practice?
yes.
Okay, we got one, scheduling and documentation. Same. Scheduling, documentation, and supervision. It's a
Excellent.
different one. Yes. Um, I know, Ashley, you're not doing any active supervision right now, are you? But I do do supervision as well. Okay. Okay, so
Right.
Alejandro's taking some notes for a colleague,
That's
and the big
nice.
thing is burnout. Well, that's
That
really
is
kind of you to step up
That's
and help your colleague,
sounds like
Alejandro.
she's doing a great job delegating, which we will also talk about.
Yes. Well, and he says yes, so she is. And then Regina said time management for administrative tasks.
Yes. And Jen mentioned therapist burnout, that she's just coming back to a role. So that
Yes.
makes that we will also be touching on that. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Excellent. So we're first going to talk about time management. Sarah, do you want to jump right in?
Yeah, absolutely. So several of you did allude to time management as kind of an area where you want some extra support. So definitely, as we're talking, please do use the chat box to let us know what thoughts and questions you might have a little bit more specifically, so that Ashley and I make sure that we tailor our conversation to your needs. But Ashley and I both, right, like, are private practice therapists and have other side hustle things going on at the same time. So we have to have really worked on refining our time management, because just like you all, it feels like there's always more things to do than there is time in the workday. And when I talk to therapists, the number one thing that I hear from therapists is there's not enough time for all the things that I want to do, which is like a really broad statement, right? And on the outside as the coach, I'm like, okay, tell me more. I need like specific data to help you figure this out. So there's a couple of different strategies that I recommend just to like getting that baseline data so that we can figure out how to help you optimize your time better. And the first thing that we can do is a time study. So that's where you, for like a week, write down for yourself how you're spending time. And I usually recommend in like 15 or 30-minute chunks, because a lot of times we go through our day doing lots of little things, not realizing how we're actually spending our time, and sometimes spending time on things that actually aren't important to us. And when we have to write it down and we realize that, it's like, oh, like maybe that's a really obvious path for some adjustment. Or when we do this time study, sometimes we realize, whoa, I thought I was only spending, like X amount of time on my notes, but I'm actually spending 3 times what I thought I was. And that's an indicator that maybe I need to streamline my documentation process, or I need a different system. So the time study is one tool that I think is a really great way to kind of get our baseline. The other thing that I have on my website, which anyone can download for free, is an inventory tool. I call it the Overwhelm Assessment for Stressed Out Therapists. And it invites you to kind of look at the different areas of your practice. And this is not just about time, but it's more about your energy. What in your practice is like really weighing you down, and do you dread it? Because if we can figure out a way to streamline that process, or outsource it, or delegate it, or just make it better for you, then you're going to use your time better as well. So I don't know, Ashley, if you've used any tools like that kind of as a starting point.
Yes. So I've done the time tracking and like more of a formal, like writing it down. And I think something that I notice, whether it's time on my phone or just feeling overwhelmed, like I feel like I spend a lot of time just feeling stressed about the things that I need to do, or just struggling to get started with things. One of the like things I have to remind myself is to just start doing something around it, and then like I can kind of take off from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like a fair amount of my time can be consumed just by like leaning into that overwhelm, and it just gets drained from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just wanted to mention in the chat that Jen had shared that they have used some time tracking apps, which have been helpful for them. So that's awesome. But Ashley, to your point, right? Like sometimes we spend so much time thinking about how overwhelmed we are and all the things that we have to do, and we don't take any action, right? And then that like contributes to us feeling stuck
Yes.
in that overwhelm. So a lot of times what I end up recommending to people is like, we want to get all these ideas out of our head. So I'm a big fan of the brain dump. Let's like just write everything that we're thinking about out, because then once we can see it, and again, I'm like really a pen and paper kind of person, but if there's obviously online tools that you can use for this kind of thing too. But once we get everything out there, we can then say, okay, like what is a now problem?
Yes.
What's a like next month problem? What's a 2024 problem? And we can kind of like start to break it down. And then from there, like you said, it's like, what's the first step for the things that we need to take care of right now?
I just need to step on the escalator and I'll get moving.
Yes.
Sometimes it doesn't feel like an escalator as well, though.
Yes.
Definitely.
But you can build momentum, right? Build momentum from that first step.
Big on momentum.
It feels so good to like be starting, even when you have a big task in front of you.
And I'm not sure about everybody else, or if you have that feeling part is something that I think can be very distracting. Like, I don't feel like doing that, or I don't feel like doing this. And the behaviorist in me is very like sort of action oriented, that if I start doing something else, I might start feeling a different way and start getting that momentum building, which feels really great as well. So focusing on that adjustment of feeling, which I will tell you, I'm very emotionally motivated. A lot of things that I do. And sometimes that like will kickstart me, and it can also slow me down.
Sure. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah. Yeah, I totally hear that, Ashley. And it made me think about like something that my clients will ask me a lot, because I'm very big on, well, this is a time management strategy. I'm very big on like scheduling time for the tasks that you want to do, right? Like having the reserved time and committing to that time. But clients will often ask me, well, like, what if I get to that time and I don't want to do the task that I reserved? Like, should I just push through because I reserved the time, or should I be gentle with myself? And my answer is always, it depends, right? Like, it depends. Like, I really am big into like sustainability, and I don't think that it's sustainable in our field to always be like pushing ourselves to do things when the timing is off, when we're not in the right space, like mentally and physically, right? Like, and emotionally. However, we still need to get stuff done too, right? So it's like kind of that, it depends. And I always like really lean into buffers. Like, I don't want my scheduled every hour with clients and tasks I need to do. I try, and I'm not always the best at this, but I try to leave empty space so that if I got to, like, let's say I plan to write my notes at 11 o'clock when we get off this call, and I just wasn't feeling it, if I had an hour later in the day, I would just switch that around, right? And like give myself that permission to adjust, as long as I know I have the time to still come back to it. I do get concerned when we're constantly pushing the same tasks off and off and off, because I think that is obviously information to us. Either we have, like a mindset block around that task. Maybe we have too much on our plate. We need to delegate. Maybe we need to start saying no, right? Like, if there's a pattern, my response to it is a little bit different.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions so far about optimizing time management, or maybe things that have worked for you to help get projects done? I know which tasks on my to-do list are my least favorite things to do, and it rhymes with trick books.
So how do you approach that, Ashley, if you know that that's the task that you dread the most? Because I think that's important to know about yourself, because then you can work around it.
Yes. So I try to focus on the fact that my bank is automatically connected to it, and the more often I do it, the easier that task is, and the longer I put it off, the harder that task is. So there's a little bit of reinforcement in the frequency and constant exposure to it. And also, there is also the reward of having everything dialed in and really crisp and clean, and seeing those numbers is like rewarding in that regard. So I do like that part as well, but it is oh man, that's an easy one to push off.
Yes. Yes, for sure. So Heather is adding in the comments, which I was just actually going to bring this up. So
Yes.
Heather says, I use the 20-minute increment, something I learned when I got diagnosed with ADHD. Focus on, I can focus for 20 minutes and take a break if I need it. And then they also said that they do the eat the frog mindset and try to get their biggest, most pressing thing off their plate first thing in the day. So both of those are things that are really great. So kind of what Heather is alluding to, I think there is the Pomodoro technique, which is a strategy that I teach in all of my group coaching programs and that we use in Documentation Day and Vibrant Therapist virtual work sessions, where we have a dedicated working period and we know when the break's going to be. And I usually do somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes is the working period, and then a 5-minute break. And you kind of repeat that for a series of times. And knowing that you're going to have that break coming, I think helps us really stay focused and stay on task for a small chunk of time versus just trying to plow through. I think people are just so much more easily distracted because they don't know when their scheduled break is going to be. And it's good for us to give ourselves those mental breaks. And when we do breaks in anything that I offer, I will either say, stay here and chit chat with me if you want to, or get up and move around if that's what your body needs during the break, or go get yourself a glass of water, get yourself something to eat. Really check in with yourself about what you need in that break time. Ashley, do you ever use anything like Pomodoro when you guys do co-working?
Yes, we do that during co-working. And that certainly helps me get through. And honestly, that even helps me prioritize what I'm going to do, the Pomodoro method and the co-working, because I know I'm going to be spending 2 hours working during that time. And it's really easy to cross something off my list, and I know it's going to get crossed off that list. And in addition to time blocking, Heather mentioned that she was diagnosed with ADHD, and I know I have some level of attention deficit. And there's a part that I use at least 20 minutes of that time letting my brain do whatever it wants, but within work. I check my email, I check my project management system, I check everything. I just let myself bounce around and let my attention deficit have free reign to work the way that it wants to. And then I'll go back to the time blocking.
Got it. Yeah.
It just feels a little freeing to be hey, I'm just going to be a little scattered in a controlled environment. Which is, for my undiagnosed attention deficit.
Well, I love how kind and gentle that is to yourself,
that feels very gentle.
right? And that you know about how you work, right? And you've built that into the structure of these co-working periods, right? Versus trying to force yourself to work in a way that isn't true to who you are, right? Yes. And then the other thing that Heather had mentioned is kind of doing the biggest, most pressing task at the beginning of the day. And I like that. I also really encourage my clients to get the biggest, most pressing tasks of the week done on Monday and Tuesday, because you all know how it goes. At least this is for me and most of my clients. By the time I get into seeing a whole bunch of my therapy clients for the week, and I have things to do for those sessions and follow up on, right? Anything else that I thought that I wanted to do kind of gets way to the bottom of the list because I'm just trying to keep up with what's going on with my therapy clients. So I usually prioritize getting my most important, personal priorities done on Monday and Tuesday.
Right. Smart.
And reserve the time for that. My schedule is set up to reflect that.
Love that. So I switched the slide, but it is not showing up on.
Oh, bummer.
On here. There we go. We caught up.
Okay. Any questions?
Excellent.
Yes. If you guys want to drop any questions.
Yeah. Before we transition to client scheduling, any other comments about time management?
While we're waiting for someone to see if they have any comments or questions, I did want to make sure that we mention delegating and outsourcing more clearly. I think I alluded to it somewhere in what we were talking about earlier, but as we're trying to figure out how to run our practices more smoothly, implementing consistent systems is one of the clearest ways to make that happen, right? And sometimes that's all about us implementing steps and following them and just being
Yes.
consistent, right? And sometimes that also means we need to loop someone else in, and we might need to delegate or outsource certain tasks to someone else. So
Yes.
for example, I know Ashley obviously has Thrive Billing, and billing is one of those tasks that I outsource.
Absolutely.
Could I do that on my own? Absolutely, I could, but it would take me a lot longer than it takes my billing service to manage my accounts, right? So I'd much rather invest my time and energy elsewhere, but I still have systems that support me in following up
Yes.
with my own clients to make sure I'm collecting payment once my billing service has done their part. So I really see it as like a collaboration, but that's all part of my system, but it does include delegation.
I could not agree with you more, and am surprised we waited until the end to talk about it. Yes, I appreciate you like circling back. I will say that my private practice is like, I would not be able to operate a private practice. We have almost 20 therapists. If we didn't have processes and procedures in place, if I didn't have support, administrative support, billing support, credentialing support, there's definitely something to be said that you don't have to do it all on your own. And a lot of services are just worth their weight to be able to offload. So yes, that's a great. So Heather asked another, say that again.
Go ahead. That's fine.
That's okay. Heather asked a question about good time management for diagnostic assessments. I seem to avoid them because they seem so big and require more brain space, but do know if I can find a way to break them up, it's easier. Just don't have it down yet.
Yes. Oh, I love this question, Heather. So one thing is I totally relate to feeling like DAs feel very big. And what I realized is that when I collected data for myself, they're not as big as I made them out to be in my head. So when I say collected data, what I mean is timing myself to see how long it actually takes me to write a DA. Like in my head, like I was thinking it takes me hours and hours to write a DA. And when I time myself, I know that I'm like consistently under an hour usually. Like I can do it in half an hour, right? Like, but in my head, I like amplified it so much bigger than it was. So that would be the first thing that I would say to you, is kind of gather some data for yourself to see if writing the DAs are as big as they actually feel like they are. Once you have that data, the next thing that I really suggest is use that data to help you block off the time to actually write your DA. So like when I schedule an intake, I'm automatically thinking, when am I going to write that client's DA? And I go through and block off that time. And then it just relieves some of that pressure on me to like worry about like how much time is that going to take? When am I going to get to it? Where does that fit in the rest of my schedule? And then a third thought I have, and then Ashley, I'm curious if you have more, but is templating. Templating is a huge way to save time, in a lot of areas in our documentation. If we have some go-to phrases and templates that we can just kind of copy and paste and then adjust, that's huge. But we can also use it in emails, in like a script that we use when we're talking to potential clients. There's so many ways templates can help therapists save time.
And if you're using, so I would just add the EHR that I use is Therapy Notes, where clients can fill out a form in advance and it populates into the intake notes. So ultimately, you're just editing information that the client input. So you could see if that's available in your EHR, if that's an option. But the templates is also like if you work within a niche or you have about 10 to 15 diagnoses that you are assessing on a regular basis, creating those templates for those diagnoses so you're not having to like copy and paste every single time that you're pulling up something that you've already created and editing that, which is so much more like time saving than just like starting from scratch every single time.
Right, absolutely. Varcia, sorry if I said your name wrong, said, I do some of the DAs during the session to help me get it completed. I also let the client know so it will take a little longer. Absolutely. So this is the idea of concurrent or collaborative documentation, which a lot of therapists really love and lean into. And if it's not for you, that's okay. But this is the idea of you can do session notes in a session at the end of your session with clients and invite them to be a part of that process. And then it's the same idea that outside of the intake or outside of your session, it's just minor updates before you hit click and sign versus the full time that it would take to write the note. And I definitely think there's some benefits of including clients in that process, so that they are part of tracking their progress in therapy, but also that you guys are really clear about what you actually were working on in session that day and what the
Right.
themes and the takeaways are.
That's great. Is that helpful, Heather? I see you nodding. Thumbs up. Great.
Thank you all for chiming in with your questions and your
Yes.
comments too. That's really helpful.
I'm also guessing that a lot of how, I know this was my experience when I had a full caseload, that my client schedule impacted my motivation to complete certain tasks and time management. And I know somebody else mentioned that they had some burnout. And when you're burned out, you don't want to manage. You don't manage your time outside of therapy very well because you're just trying to, restore and rejuvenate or just get some rest as well. So I'm sure that's can be an experience across the board with how much therapy is being requested right now. I feel like everybody's schedules are full. It's hard to find good therapists, find therapists in general. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on effective client scheduling, Sarah.
Absolutely. So as I was listening to Ashley, my first thought was, okay, take a deep breath, right? It's not our personal responsibility to fix a whole flawed
Yes.
system or to be
Yes.
that, be everything for everyone, right? And I've really had to embrace this over the years, right? Even before COVID and before it felt like it was getting more and more challenging to find a therapist because I was reducing my caseload to focus on
Right.
the vibrant therapist, which is something I'm so passionate about. But sometimes I still feel guilty, but I just remind myself, Sarah, it's best for you to do what's best for you because that trickles down to the
Right.
clients that you do see, seeing the best version of yourself and not the stressed out, burnt out, overwhelmed
Right.
therapist. So when I think about scheduling, I think about the fact that the schedule that works best for you is actually the best schedule for everyone, right? So I really, really encourage therapists to lean into figuring out what their ideal schedule is. And that's tuning into their own energy, right? Are you a morning person? Are you an afternoon person? What kind of spacing do you need, right? If just because your neighbor down the hall sees 8 therapy clients a day doesn't mean that you need to see 8 therapy clients a day. Really, when you walk out of your office at the end of the day, what it feels like your sweet spot, and then design your schedule around your knowledge of yourself. Don't get too caught up in, well, how am I going to get clients to come to this spot, right? I really believe that when we're clear about what we want and need from our schedule, we can attract the clients that can work with that.
I agree completely. I remember when I first started seeing clients that, and maybe everyone had a similar experience, but my schedule was wide open. I will see you whenever you want, whenever you can. I just need to make some dollars.
Yep.
So I remember as my schedule became more full and that I became much more specific about the times that I was available. Suddenly I was less available in the mornings, and I worked predominantly from 11 to 6. And then as my responsibilities grew with the practice, with the billing company, that reduced even more. And what was interesting is I remember being really afraid when I first started to make myself unavailable because I didn't want to miss any of those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned, with a full caseload is that clients seem to make it work. If I wasn't available on Friday, they seem to find some availability on Monday through
Yep,
Thursday.
absolutely.
And that's, I think, a really important thing to understand, is that your clients, like, unless they are have a completely impossible schedule, where they're working, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., that ultimately they will find a way to see you or to adjust to your availability.
Right.
And that's very important.
Right, absolutely. And I think just because a client has a very rigid schedule doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be the one to adapt for them. Perhaps there's another therapist who has, more flexibility, and that person might be the best fit, right? Like, I'm never hesitant about referring clients out because I know that there's an abundance of clients, and if someone's not the right fit for me, like, I know what's best is to send them in another direction, because they deserve someone who's going to be excited about seeing them at, like 7 p.m. And that, I know that's not me. If I'm trying to see a client at 7 p.m. right now, I am exhausted, and that's not fair to a client. And I've gone through, I think very similar to you, Ashley, right? Like the iterations of like kind of tightening up my schedule over the years. And every time I dread these conversations so much, and I build it up so much in my head that like all my clients are going to be so angry that I'm changing my schedule. The fact of the matter is that has never, ever happened, right? Like, I have been very generous in giving ample notice when I need to make a significant adjustment to my schedule. And I'm always offering them another spot, right? Like, and they're then able to accommodate that. So I think we have to be careful as therapists not to be so in our client's head, like anticipating what their reaction is, because most of the time we are wrong, and our clients are reasonable humans as well.
I would agree. And I'm going to maybe carry this over into other areas, like applying missed session fees, increasing your rates. Clients are pretty, like, way more adaptable than we maybe give them credit for, but I think it's also more about fear of rejection, letting our clients down, them no longer seeing us. I think there's obviously other things tied in, but I think adjusting your client schedule or adjusting your availability also can fit into some of those other categories that are difficult to have those conversations with our clients.
Sure. Yeah. Ashley, I want to go back just to some of the comments that have been coming in the chat box. Alejandro asked, what are your sentiments around remote monitoring tools, i.e. apps that allow patients to self-screen at home? And I think this probably was intended under the time management category and we missed it. However, I'm going to think about it in terms of effective client scheduling, because I think when we're talking about our work, we also need to think about our availability to clients outside of session, right? So a question that pops up for me is these tools that clients are filling out on their own. Are you then expecting yourself to review that outside of your session time, or are you taking time then at the beginning of session to go over that data with your clients, right? And either way, I have no judgment about it, but that it is part of how we conceptualize our schedule and how we're using our time. So like, I personally don't use self-monitoring tools for clients to fill out at home, and I don't have any opinion about it really. Like, if it's helpful to someone's practice, that's awesome, and I encourage them to use them. But then you just want to think about how does that fit into your communication with clients outside of session time and how you're using your time. And Ashley, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts about that.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Perfect. Okay, so then the next comment was Jen saying trying to get in the swing of things too, has a tiny caseload right now, so not using an EHR. Okay, so, and that's okay too, right? Like, I didn't use an EHR when I first started my practice. I do think when you are using an EHR, a lot of times they have a lot of what am I thinking? Like different like services that are incorporated in to it, right? Like client reminders, some of the templates that Ashley was talking about earlier. So my only comment about this is if you are using an EHR, make sure you're using it to its fullest potential to make things easier for you. But if you're not using an EHR, that doesn't mean you can't still have systems and templates. You can, it would just be in a different format, right? Like you'd probably have like a Google Doc with some of your common language, or you would just like write out your system flows for yourself in a doc so that you can reference it and keep yourself on track. Any other thoughts about that one, Ashley?
I can't recommend EHRs enough. I am very pro EHR, and I think that that there's a cost of doing business, and that EHRs, especially ones like Simple Practice and Therapy Notes, are geared toward therapists to make your life easier. And they are each like nuanced, but as somebody who is in the billing world and is a therapist, like, yeah, I think that they can make your life very simple and very easy, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel because they did it for you.
Right. And I think I haven't done the research for a while, right? Because I've been using my EHR for years, but I think there are, different options for someone who has a small practice, right? And like that is definitely something that I thought about when choosing my EHR is just, if I'm only going to see, like what people think is a small number of clients,
right?
How does the cost work this out? Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
So that's just something that I would say, if you like you could research to find the EHR that's a good fit for you when you're ready for that step. And then the last comment was about use to struggle with schedule and taking vacation holiday time. That is a really important thing to, number one, notice, and of course, number two, to be diligent about scheduling our time off. And I think similar to what Ashley and I were talking about earlier with identifying what your ideal schedule is, clients, again, are so reasonable. They understand that we need to take time off too. I've never ever had a client be angry with me that I took time off, because again, it's more about the communication and just making sure that they know ahead of time that you're going to be off, and then what they should do if they would need some support while you're away.
Yeah. Excellent.
Anything you want to add into that, Ashley?
So when I read that comment about the struggle with schedule and taking vacation holiday time, I think maybe some of that struggle also has to do with not bringing in any money during that time. And that can be a hurdle as well. And something that I know that this is sort of part of client scheduling and understanding your revenue for regularly scheduled time off, is to just plan for that in advance and start putting some money away from savings if you're able to, even just a little bit every week, automatically drafted, can really prevent some of that struggle when you know that money's already going to be there. If you know how much money you're making in a week and you put that money aside and you don't have to worry about bringing in that money for the week, and you have already sort of padded your savings with that, that can be really helpful, instead of it feeling like this abrupt, like, I'm not going to make any money that week. We've already made the money. You can take that time off without worrying about the income that might be lost from it, because there's a lot of things that you are going to be benefiting from by having taken that time off and not having to give during that time in a caretaking way, and reduce that burnout that we're all very familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, when you started talking about like income and whatnot, it made me think of a concept that I think about a lot when I'm talking about scheduling is know your numbers. I see a lot of therapists overscheduling, and this is not necessarily even related to time off. They just overschedule because they're so anxious about, like, what if all of a sudden I have a huge dip in my caseload? So they're overscheduling and they're burning themselves out. They're not sticking to their ideal schedule because their anxiety about finances gets in the way. Maybe they're not taking time off, or when they do take time off, like the weeks that they get back, they're like jamming every single client because they're trying to make up for that missed income. And one of the things that I think we absolutely have to do as therapists is be really, really clear on our numbers. How much Are you charging per session? And if you're
Right.
like, I have an insurance-based practice, I know Ashley does too, that's okay, right? So there's a little bit of variation there, but on average, how much am I bringing in every session? I need to know that. I need to know how many sessions I really need to be scheduling each week to be able to cover my expenses. So that means I actually have to know what all my expenses are and look at those numbers and be honest with myself.
Right.
I
Right.
need to know what my goal is to be able to bring home. And then I also need to like be paying attention to like how often do I get no-shows or late cancels, and how often am I charging my no-show fee when that happens? If I get timely cancellations, still
Yeah.
how many of those do I get on average? Because I want to build in buffer time. And when you know those numbers and you're really clear about your numbers, it's easier to say like, nope, I don't need to take another new intake. I'm already maxed out. Or nope, I don't need to like bend over backwards to add in another client spot if there's not like truly an emergency. And absolutely, I should take time off, and I'm not going to kill myself before or after seeing so many clients because I built in this into my how I conceptualize my business for this year. Let's see. Heather made a comment. Let me read that before we move on, Ashley.
Yep.
Heather said, I heard about a clinician taking a week off every 3 months and initially thought that was so much. But if you worked a regular job, that's 4 weeks off of time every year, which is pretty standard. I started this early this year and my schedule off my weeks out for the whole year, and it's been great. Love that strategy. I was just looking at my calendar for and like actually like I'm doing what I'm telling you guys. Like I was looking at my numbers and my calendar for 2024 trying to anticipate how much time off I thought I wanted to take, and like we can do that now. Some of the days like I know exactly what they're going to be, and some will be flexible days off.
Any other questions about client management? Ultimately, I feel like this really leads into our next subject very well. And ultimately, managing your schedule is a version of self-care and well-being, like preserving that well-being and overextending your schedule, not setting time aside, not taking those vacations, not like even not working enough could potentially put you in a financial situation, or not prevent you from meeting your goals, that sort of thing. So ultimately, I think these lend right into that self-care and professional well-being for sure.
Absolutely. As we kind of transition and see if anyone pops on, I'll just like maybe highlight a couple of things that I do think straddle these two topics, if it works for you, Ashley.
Yes, absolutely.
So wrapping up scheduling, I want to just reinforce the idea that like your schedule isn't just about your client appointments. There's so much that we do as therapists outside of client appointments. So make sure that you are incorporating documentation into your schedule, documentation time. Make sure you're incorporating time to respond to your voicemails and your emails, because these things like hanging over our head and we're just like crossing our fingers for a client cancellation just add to unnecessary stress for us. Make sure that you take breaks. Make sure that your schedule isn't just all about your clients, and that you are scheduling things that are good for you too, that nurture your well-being. I love, like Ashley and I like check in once in a while. I love to have my workday include meetings with other therapists, because chatting with other therapists is really fulfilling. And some people might be like, well, you shouldn't be talking to your like friends during the workday. You should be seeing clients. And I'm like, no, I absolutely should be talking to my friends that are therapists during the workday. And even if we only talk half the time about something work related, that's okay. That's really fulfilling to me.
Awesome. And enriching.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely. For self-care and professional well-being, I like the ultimately strategy is a part of that as well. Like, I think we all are aware of how difficult it is to take care of ourselves. and while it's easy to put tasks on the bottom of that list, I think we also end up at the bottom of the list and forget that we are in a position of caretaking, and that our cups are like constantly being drained and constantly being
Yes.
pulled from.
Yep.
And so it's important to keep that cup full.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
And it's important because we are important, right?
Yes.
But it's also important because the work that we do, like on ourselves, trickles down to how we show up in our personal and professional relationships,
Right.
and ethically, right? Like ethically, we are supposed to be taking good care of ourselves so that we do not do harm to our clients. And I have a whole like 3 hours ethics course on this subject. But like I always say at the core, right? Like first and foremost, you are worthy of taking good care of yourself, and just as everyone else is, right? And you would tell your clients that over and over again. But I think a lot of times therapists are not as good at practicing what they preach as they are telling their clients what they should be doing.
Well, it feels very selfish. It feels the opposite of caretaking. It doesn't always feel like what it does, even though when we do it, it feels so enriching and like, oh man, I needed that. I think we're so like sparse in doling it out that like doing it more might even feel like, oh, that's too much self-care.
That's funny. Like one time someone said that to me, like, I feel like this is too much self-care. And I'm like, there's no such thing.
There's
Like
no
we
such
can
thing.
never,
There's
ever
no such
reach
thing.
the max
Can't
on
over moisturize.
Right, right. There's no such thing as too much self-care. So I think that like the most basic place to start is all the things that you're telling your clients to do, apply them yourself, right? Like, and you guys probably have had that. I have this all the time in my sessions where I like say something like an encouragement to a client to something that they should try. And then in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, Sarah, you should maybe try that too. When you
Yes, definitely. Do you have a self-care strategy that is your go-to, Sarah?
Yeah, I think one of my like most favorite things to do, and I will 100% admit that I'm inconsistent about it, is a morning walk to kind of bridge sending my family off to school and the start of my work day.
Nice.
I did it right before we got on this call today, or before
Nice.
Ashley and I got on this call before you all were here. So I try to be as consistent about that as possible. And there's a lot of times I'm like, oh, I should just get to my office sooner. Like it would feel good to like clean out my email inbox, but I will talk myself through that and say, no, Sarah, like actually what will feel the most good is to go on your short walk. And 90% of the time, then I get to my office and I knock out those emails so efficiently, or my session notes or whatever it is. Like it doesn't have to be the either or that sometimes I build it up to be in my head.
I love that.
How about you, Ashley? What's your like most favorite self-care practice?
I would say, again, maybe not every day, but spending like 10 to 20 minutes doing like a headspace meditation is really helped my brain, especially again, that attention deficit. I'm certainly a thinker and spend a lot of time thinking. I probably have about 5,000 minutes logged on the app, and certainly see a difference from it. So I don't necessarily use it only when I feel stressed or overwhelmed.
Right.
I try to use it just as a time to help my brain just take a break or like sort through some of those thoughts in a much more productive way than I would on my own. But yes, I love walking and exercise. Like those certainly are beneficial for me as well. But I would say meditation is like the most beneficial,
very cool.
Consistent. Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone who is listening wants to drop in the chat box a favorite like strategy that they lean on, we would love to hear that as well. I don't know when I started doing this. Probably I think in September. I did it September, October, and now I did it for November. I've been blocking off an hour in my like work day as much as possible, and I call it Vibrant Me time. And that's where I will do the walk. I usually try to do like a meditation during that during the Vibrant Me time, and then like I've been experimenting with some of the EFT tapping and some like just like mindset journaling stuff too during that time, which I love it, right? Like if I be really consistent with that, it would be like an all-round win for me.
Exactly. And one of the things we have listed as well is boundaries. And I think before we kind of wrap up, I think boundaries are a really important thing to mention in self-care and professional well-being, being a care provider, a mental health care provider, being somebody who has the answers, being somebody who is leaned on for a living. It's very easy to do that outside outside of our professional lives as well. And it can be difficult to say no when there's sort of this assumption about what that role is. So I struggle with saying no. It helps me to take some time to think about responding to certain inquiries or requests. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that like it's one of the things that I work really hard on myself and with my clients, my coaching clients, that is the other therapists, is like being really intentional about our yeses and our nos. Because every time we say yes to something, we're setting ourselves up to say no to something else, right? Like, so we always want to say yes first to ourselves, and make sure that like we slow down enough to think through, is this what's best for me? Is it, like I talk a lot about vibrance, right? Like, is this what's going to make me feel more vibrant or not? Is it going to take away from my vibrance? And this question of like, really, what are my personal and professional goals? Where's my practice going? And is saying yes and no, is it in alignment with those goals, or is it just like people pleasing? What's that all about? Because I think we really just need to slow it all down and make sure we're intentional about yeses and nos. Yes. So Heather wrote a comment here about feeling like they are not great about putting themselves first, so they use their dogs as an excuse, and having hard end time to give them an hour walk while the sun is out. So this time of year it's done at 4. Ooh, I love that. I love that. Like, my kids are definitely my motivator for a hard stop, right? Like, to be home at a certain time when they get off the bus. And it's okay that we have to lean into that. And at some point, hopefully it gets like enough of a habit that we don't have to use dogs or children or whatever else as our excuse to have a hard stop. The other thing, Ashley, I wanted to say before we kind of move on, if it's okay, is when we're thinking about self-care, I definitely think about making sure we're nurturing our personal relationships outside of the therapy office, right? Making sure that we have strong supportive relationships with our colleagues when we are in the office, that when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel like we're struggling with the client, we have trusted people, and the trusted part is really important. Trusted people that we can turn to and consult with. I think being a therapist is such a unique thing because we can't all go home and like vent to our families and talk it through with people outside of the office. So those personal relationships are important in one realm, but also having really solid professional relationships in the other realm is important as well.
I could not agree more. Another way to fill your cup.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yes.
Any other questions about self-care? Give some time to answer. Sarah, I really appreciate your time and willing to share the things that you've done for yourself. Personally, one of the reasons I really love working with you is you're not just teaching on things, like you're tracking your own time. You're very focused on also doing the work that you're coaching and helping other therapists do. And I see that in your life, and I see that in your work, and I see it on your posts. And I really think that brings a level of authenticity, and also like it makes me want to do more and try harder to take care of myself better. And I think that is really conveyed in like how you come across and what you share. I think it's awesome. I appreciate
thank you very much,
Ashley. I appreciate you partnering with me. Yes.
Yeah, I really appreciate that feedback. And it's important to me, right? Like that that I do come across as authentic and real, right? Because I am always working on the same stuff that I'm talking about. And like, maybe I've done some more learning and research and like a little bit in a different spot in the journey, but it's important to me to like show when I struggle, when, like when I'm not as consistent as I would like to be too, because it gives permission for other people
Right.
to be
It's
imperfect
real.
too, because we all are
Yes.
imperfect.
It's just real. All of us are working really hard to build our businesses, to show who we are, and I think that you do a very good job of that. Here's a few offerings from Sarah. You can find more information about her at sarahlightshoe.com. And if you have any questions about the billing services that we offer at Thrive Billing Services, we offer contracting and credentialing services, billing packages, private practice consultation. And we also have like a free quote, but if you go on our website at thrivebillingservices.com, there's a quote form right on there. And I think that is everything. And we ran out of time, so I had to blow through everything really
No
quick.
worries.
So I apologize if I was pushing you. I wanted to make sure we covered everything.
Yes, thank you all for being here. I know people are starting to hop out, but if anyone has any last minute questions, we are here.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley.
Just going